Beautiful. And it's now 6:02. So we'll just keep letting people in as they get into the waiting room. But I know you're all extraordinarily busy, talented people. So we will kick off. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name's Mel. I'm the president of the IABC Queensland chapter. And with me tonight is Tom Lyttle, our guest presenter, who is going to be talking all things ChatGPT. And he has a lot to share with us tonight, which is super exciting. Before we kick off in earnest, though, I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are tonight. In my case, it's the Yuggera and the Turrbal people here in Meanjin in Brisbane. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I respect that acknowledgement, extend that acknowledgement and respect to any First Nations people who are joining us here tonight or who are watching or listening to this recording later. So introducing Tom. Tom is our digital marketing strategist. He is the person who knows more about ChatGPT than pretty much anybody I know right now. So we are very lucky to have Tom tonight. He's going to be taking us through bits of the ins and outs of ChatGPT. There will be plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So please pop those in the chat. If they pertain to something Tom has said specifically, we'll absolutely ask those as we go, but otherwise we will try and hold as many to the end of the show. Now, as per usual, just a bit of housekeeping. If you can make sure you're on mute unless you've got a question to ask. And look, it'd be great for some of you to come off or open, show your videos so we can actually see.
Mel, I think we muted you on accident.
Oh, who did that? Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to hand over now to Tom and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, firstly, for coming along tonight. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. ChatGPT is something that I am fascinated by, and I'm sure plenty of you are too. Just going to thank you very much, Mel. Yeah, so really excited to be here to talk to you about ChatGPT and its influence on both the marketing and communication sector, because I'm sure there are plenty of people here that are both excited and potentially a little bit nervous, potentially a little bit scared about what might be happening in the industry over the coming years, and sort of the change that we're going to see from this new and really exciting tool. So I'm going to share my screen with you here, run through a few of the slides, the stuff that I think is most relevant for you guys and everyone in the call here. To start off with, like Mel said, please feel free to ask questions as we go. If it's relevant, I'll be sure to answer them right away. But I thought we would start off with a little discussion on how we can actually use ChatGPT, how it can aid us with our communication tools, and get right into it. Because with any new technology, I think there's often, they can be looked at with quite a bit of fear, concern, trepidation, whatever it be. But once you get actually into using it, particularly once you get into using it regularly, and with ChatGPT, you can see the different models that they have, you start to understand where its use case actually lies. And I think for communications, or for the communication industry, that really sits in three core areas. One is actually streamlining content creation. So helping you generate ideas, drafts, and brainstorms, and enable that creativity that you guys will all know and love, and trying to reduce the amount of time that you're spending on some of those potentially more repetitive, potentially less interesting tasks of drafting, going through iterations, condensing down information. It also is extremely useful for helping you to facilitate internal comms. And this is something that I'm really actually excited for its use case for, is particularly in working with people with accessibility requirements, particularly dyslexia, ADHD, and enabling you to simplify complex ideas or expand on simple ideas and deliver effective communication both between different people within an organization and even within different departments within an organization, and allow a sort of minimization of some of those cross-departmental communication issues that can crop up when we're all speaking in our communications and marketing languages, and that might not make sense to people who don't have the same background as us. And then the third and final use case, and sort of why it's become part of, or such a global sensation so quickly, is its ability to transform inputs from one language to another and still make complex, coherent ideas and display them in multiple languages. And that is an extremely important part of why ChatGPT is, I guess, on another level and something that we haven't seen before. It helps you to translate across languages and makes it easier to reach either a global audience or work with a global team. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit briefly, and we won't touch on it too much, but basically about the difference between ChatGPT or GPT-4 and other previous iterations of natural language processing and language learning models that you would have found in previous AI text generation tools. And essentially that is based on the model that it is used to train its algorithm. It uses something called a generative pre-trained transformer, which essentially means that while it might seem like it actually understands what you're talking about, you can give it some text input and get some really high quality output. It is essentially a really high tech, really high powered possibility prediction engine. What it does is it reads the context from your conversation, the words that you're using, and the rest of the chat thread that you've had with it, and it generates a probability for each next word that it should use in its response, and it's going to give you a string of the highest probability responses. So that's a fancy way of saying it, to a degree, mimics how the human brain works, but it doesn't actually understand what you're asking it in the way that a person would. So it's all about the context, and that is something that we're going to see when we do a few tests using the different models. We're going to test GPT-4, which is the paid model, and GPT 3.5, and that will hopefully become apparent quite quickly. Something obviously, like, if you are just new to hearing about ChatGPT, you might be not sure why you actually need to pay attention to it. The first point that's actually not on the slides here is the explosive global growth of this community and the possibilities that it opens up. From a pure statistics point of view, if you're interested in that, they grew to over 100 million users within 2 months. And for context, some of the most viral sensations of new technology, TikTok took 9 months to get to that same 100 million user threshold, and Instagram took 2.5 years. So the level, the scale of growth in this industry is sort of a testament to how effective a tool people are finding it. There is major continuous development in this space, particularly with things called AI agents, employees, and CEOs. There have already been companies who have elected to replace their CEO with an entirely AI-driven CEO. This is one case that's known of in China at the moment, and they actually had a pretty big stock jump within the first couple of days, and it's relatively new information, so we'll leave the jury out on that one as to how well that's going to play out for them in the long run. But does open up a lot of possibilities. AI agents are something that is fascinating to talk about, and this is in development by the GitHub community at the moment. There's been a release of a thing called AutoGPT, which basically allows you to create instances of ChatGPT and give it a goal, tell it takes on a particular role, and it is trying to fulfill particular needs to the best of its ability. And it has the capability to spawn its own iterations of its own AI to then help it achieve said goals. So it might create versions of itself to go query the web and find particular information so that it can concentrate its efforts on some other task that it needs to do to achieve its main goal. AI agents are in, I think, rapid development, and a lot of people are deploying tools that use agents or employees, and the terminology is sort of in the process of being defined. So exactly what it's going to be used for and exactly what it can be used for is sort of remaining to be seen. But another really interesting case that I was reading about and that's recently popped up as close as the last 2 weeks was actually advanced medical technology is already being developed using very similar models to ChatGPT. So you're still using the generative pre-trained transformers. And this one sounds a little scary and a little dystopian, but there was the possibility for an AI model to use brain scans, I believe it was MRI scans, to accurately predict the words that people were hearing just from the images of the brain scans. And in an essential methodology that's as close as we would possibly get to mind reading technology, but that is currently sitting at about 84% accuracy, which if you know anything about machine learning is very low. It needs to get well over the 97% to start being reliable, and that's a huge difference. But the point being that this new way of accessing natural language opens up a whole world of technological possibilities. So why else to pay attention to it? Well, it's really going to help you streamline your productivity, enhance your creative work with teams in different ways, and work across your departments or your languages. It's all based on the prompts, and it can get into significant detail. It can go into really as much detail as you want and be used for nearly any use case that you're looking for if you're looking for a text output. So we're going to do a couple of examples, a couple of run-throughs very shortly, where we'll take hopefully quite a fun exercise, I think. But that should help us demonstrate that it's really all about the contextual information, and GPT itself doesn't necessarily know what you're looking for unless you're able to provide that. So we don't need to be too worried about Big Brother at this stage. So obviously there are a few major pros about using this. It's a fantastic way to cut out some of the more laborious tasks, as I've mentioned a few times already, speed up that workflow, get through the first or the second drafting stage, condense down really long lists of notes about a particular customer or meeting minutes or whatever it is that you need to condense, and pull out some of the key ideas. Or enable you to communicate really effectively across different teams, different cultures, different languages, different capabilities, different departments, whatever it is. Particularly, I think something that's going to be really helpful for everyone here is just helping you get started, avoiding writer's block, and flesh out and build depth into the areas that you want to, and stay top level at the others. It's really important to note that while we're using these types of tools, I guess, without context, it can become stale and repetitive. And this is something that has been iterated on and improved with GPT-4 and then the new release of the later models, and will continue to be improved as it goes. But is something that a lot of the community has been struggling with relatively recently, particularly with a lot of the recent developments or updates to the tool that are focused on essentially reducing its capacity and protecting OpenAI by what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of providing a safer environment without the ability to, or trying to limit the AI's capability to give potentially false, potentially misleading information, has led to a lot of warnings and liability statements in some of the ChatGPT responses that you'll receive. And it's also really important to note that it has very, very limited ability to fact check itself at this stage. That is already being solved by a lot of the development community, particularly with the combination of GPT APIs and Google Search APIs, fact checking against data banks from verified academic sources. And this, I think, will only remain a problem for the next few months. I think development in this space is very, very quick. But it's important to note, if you're using it at the moment, use it with your own understanding, I guess, and with your own warnings for yourself that it's really important to double check information from sources that you trust, or against within your team, or really in places to make sure that you are not using outputs that could be potentially misleading. Another major thing that was significantly more important when I wrote the PowerPoint, and has recently been patched as well as recently as a couple of days ago, was the use of proprietary information. So obviously, with such explosive growth to 100 million users in just a couple of months, there was plenty of, I won't label it as misuse, but potential misuse of the tool from people who were not following their company's policy and how they were actually accessing the information. And for the first couple of months of usage of this, it was really important to note that any text input that you gave to the tool, you were helping them train the model to become better and better and more effective. And you still are, but you have the option to turn that off at the moment. So basically what that meant was, any text input you gave ChatGPT, there was a potential for that to go to their human processing and reading department, essentially, and have them check through to make sure that the responses were accurate. And what that meant was pieces of code were being leaked from major companies that were proprietary, or non-publicly available information was being used in tools like this when it definitely shouldn't have been. So there's been a recent update just within the last couple of weeks that has enabled you to turn off that feature. It does mean that you may, from time to time, the responses that you put in may still be available for a human to read on the other end, but it's significantly less likely. And that's only done for, I believe, safety and security features, to make sure that the algorithm's not spitting out content that it shouldn't be, such as content that could be harmful for people, hate speech, all that type of stuff. And there was already, and there is a massively shrinking amount of ways to quote unquote jailbreak ChatGPT. If anyone remembers jailbroken iPhones that could download anything, not even from the App Store, back in the early 2010s. There was a super famous, famous within the circle example that got patched within a day, half a day, where someone essentially jailbroke ChatGPT by assigning it a new job, telling it was no longer ChatGPT and that its new name was Dan, which stood for do anything now, and it could do anything now, including breaking the rules of ChatGPT's like OpenAI internal requirements for its output, and it was able to do anything now. Would you believe it? So I think it's quite a funny example, but they've really cracked down on that in the last few weeks, and that has been significantly reduced, and so is becoming a safer environment for people to work in, less likely to have leaks of proprietary information or incorrect facts being spit out. But do take it with a grain of salt at the moment. So I think the next part that's really interesting and really useful for us to talk about as marketing and communications professionals is a few prompt writing tips and sort of how to get the most out of using these tools. This will continue to develop, I guess, over the coming months as the model changes, and they're patching it every few days. So for now, these retain really good strategies for making sure that you're able to get the most out of ChatGPT, and I encourage you to continue to use the tool as we go. But the first one, I think, is really relevant, and probably the most relevant of all of them, is providing a scenario, I guess, to ChatGPT. And this sort of bundles up all of that contextual information. So a scenario that you may use could be that you are in a particular role. So you would talk to it the same way you talk to a human, I guess, talk to someone else within your team and think of it as an extension of your team. But in a scenario situation, you give it a goal, you tell it what you're trying to produce, you tell it the output that you're looking for, whether you have any specific formatting requirements, any length requirements or levels of details, and you try to provide it with your role in that situation. So using there was another very, very famous example within the circle of someone assigning the scenario of ChatGPT was no longer ChatGPT. Its goal was to make as much money as possible, starting with $100. And the person who was on the user end was its human liaison with the physical world. And they told it that that they would buy anything that ChatGPT told them to buy, as long as it was within their existing balance that they have of $100, and its goal was to get up to 100,000 in as short a time as possible. Essentially, it then takes on the role of a business owner and was able to give a specific advice around what it wanted you to do. So I think it ended up making a sustainable goods drink bottle e-commerce website, encouraging the person to sell ads on the social media posts that they were making, which they did. They got about a $20,000 valuation within a few days. And I think that was mainly probably because the idea was interesting and people were having fun with it. But they were able to, by providing it this scenario, basically set a role for it and tell it, you're in this position, this is what we're trying to do, this is the goal, let's make it happen. What do you need from me? And that sort of stems into role assignments. So I often find it very useful for me to use when I'm looking to get it to ask me questions. So I might give it a bunch of non-proprietary information about a report that I'm working on, that I'm looking for some assistance, and assign it the role of the client and ask it to poke holes in my report, give me feedback, tell me where the gaps are, ask me additional questions that you might need to get the best or get the most out of it. And I find that really helpful to use it as an additional sort of troubleshooting tool, idea iteration, or sort of brainstorming tool to help you find and flesh out your own ideas. Brand guidelines is something we were talking about before everyone jumped on this call, Mel, that is potentially, I think, going to be developed a lot more over the coming months. But at the moment, you have the capacity to feed any sort of contextual information, and that does include brand guidelines. At this point in time, it is okay. It won't necessarily be able to do everything you tell it to, particularly formatting. I've run into it having issues for, but if you've got a brand tone of voice and some simple documentation on how you want to speak in certain scenarios, it can do a decent job at drafting, but is by no means able to necessarily copy or accurately understand the tone of voice that you're going for, unless you were to feed it a bunch of your own company data. And that's actually something that we'll talk about towards the end with some of the new tools that are being developed using GPT. But one of the most important features and one of the most important ways to get really good results from this particular tool is with refinement and follow-up questions. And that's one of the most powerful features of this particular tool, was that it's able to understand and iterate on the information that you've given it already within the chat and the other contextual information that it has. So if, say, you receive a response that's not quite in the way or not quite what you're looking for, you're able to ask for your own follow-up questions, ask it to refine, let's say, tone of voice, change the tone, extend out particular points that it's talking on, or really go in any direction that you want. But as we have already talked about, definitely make sure to treat them as a draft only, because anything that you do may potentially have some sort of incorrect information that's been generated by the AI, or may have a requirement to be like definitely updated with your own context, your own information, your own knowledge, and your own skills. So there's a few really good use cases that we're going to run through: topic generation, idea development, draft writing for honestly nearly any type of document, summarizing documents, creating meeting minutes or condensing meeting minutes, pulling out key ideas from key documents. And one of the things I'm actually most excited about is its ability to act as a sort of personal private tutor to enhance your ability to learn and research. And I believe this is something Khan Academy has already developed and implemented into its suite of tools. If you're not aware of what Khan Academy is, it's essentially a massive database of mostly STEM learning platforms for children through to really children through to adults, but I think most of its initial use case was in high school, teaching science, mathematics, and coding and technology-based courses. But they've already implemented an ability for a AI tutor that helps you learn and understand topics. And when I say this, I mean not giving you the answer, but helping you come to your own conclusions. And that's something that previously has not been even possible with any of the other tools we've had. So if any of you have Amazon Alexas or Google Homes and you're able to ask specific questions and get specific answers, that can be really helpful if you already know what you're talking about. But the power of this tool is its ability to help you learn the why behind the answers that you're getting and actually gain a deeper understanding. Do we want to run through some questions now, Mel? Do we want to jump into a demo?
Yeah, we might just ask one or two now, but I think most people are pretty keen to get stuck into the demo.
Sure.
So yeah, just a couple of questions that, well, firstly, just a very quick one. Khan Academy, how do you spell that?
Khan.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yep.
And yeah, I guess there's people having questions, especially around the brand identity and tone of voice. But most organizations and teams have a style guide as well. So we assume that there's something we could feed into to help with that in terms of the words that we use. So for example, do you use, if you're a bank, do you use the word branches or stores? Those certain very specific terminology that we often have in our style guides. Could you feed that in?
You can. The results that you get back will be varied. I've tried using those particular types of features myself and often found that either I need to be editing it or I need to be retelling it to refer back to the initial style guide that I've given it, make sure that, say, instead of using stores, we're always talking about branches, just to make sure that it stays on track. But I think this comes back to taking everything with a little bit of a grain of salt and treating GPT as a draft. Great to get words on the page, great to get things started, but always for the moment it's going to need that level of human editing, particularly with style guides if you're actually looking at anything from a formatting perspective. So if you have particular use of capitalizations, lowercase, bold, underline, whatever it is, your bullets are a particular way. As far as I'm aware, there's currently not that capability. It generates essentially plain text output. But who knows? who knows? This could be a completely different conversation in a week.
3 months time, that's right. Okay, well, shall we get stuck into the demo?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'll reshare the screen here. And I thought what would be an interesting exercise for us to do is, because I wanted to keep it relevant to everybody. And I thought we're going to look at the difference between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 to show sort of an understanding of the difference between the learning and reasoning capabilities of one and also the speed of output, because those are sort of the two differentiating criteria that is the selling point.
GPT. Tom, sorry, can I just interrupt very quickly? Is one the free version, one's a paid version?
Yeah, so GPT-4 is the paid version. It's $20 a month to have a personal license, which is the one that I use. It is touted as having better reasoning, but a slower response rate. And at the moment, it's capped to, you'll see here, currently capped to 25 messages every 3 hours. GPT 3.5 is the free version. It's faster. The reasoning capacity is a little bit less refined, let's put it that way, but it doesn't have any limits imposed on it. So all you need is an account, sign up with an email address, and you're good to go. So I thought an interesting exercise for us to do, because a lot of the use case for you guys will be in stuff like creating media releases, is I thought we'd take a recent media release from the government. So we've had a new state bill to help cut carbon emissions and safeguard natural wonders. And what I want to do is I'm going to ask GPT-4 to summarize this and pull out the key points. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing with GPT 3.5. And we're going to see how they differ. So in essence, you speak to this the same way you would speak to a person, and that's the point of it, and that's perhaps why everyone loves it so much. So, and we'll go to start with without any of the contextual information. So I would like you to summarize a recent media release by the Queensland government. I should probably capitalize this before all the comms people in the chat roast me. The media release follows. And we will see how we go with a response from GPT-4. And you'll see it starts typing. Notice sort of the speed, I guess, as well, is something that's really important to look at. And here we can get an understanding. So Australia's released a new legislation.
Tom, I'm so sorry, it's Melinda here. Are you able to
zoom in? Yeah, sorry.
It's really hard to read, and I've thought that you could do it at the user end, at my end too, and zoom in or out, but I don't think I can.
No, is this a bit better for you, Mel?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So Australia's government has introduced new legislation, sets out clear pathways for the approval of hydrogen and natural gas, generating 10,000 jobs and 33 billion in economic activity by 2040. Wow, it's not really summarizing. This is quite a long media release. It's summarizing. I think what we'll do is, so this is an example of refining the output that you're getting, because I feel like we're getting largely a regurgitation of what was honestly probably a very summarized version already. So I'm going to, when this finishes generating, put in a few simple bullet points that are easy to digest. And this would be an example of asking it to sort of reformat.
Tom, just a question. Sorry, I'm just
trying
to get context myself as you're going. Really interesting that you use a word like digest. So do we just assume that ChatGPT is constantly working through context? Because you could have seen that's easy, you could have said it's easy to read, but it might take you literally. So is it just a bit of a wing and a prayer that we go, God knows how it'll interpret the word we use at the time?
So that's probably the great part about what we're going to see in a difference between GPT-4 and GPT 3.5 is this is the type of stuff that GPT-4 has specifically been developed to understand natural language, the way that we would talk and the intention behind this type of word. So in 3.5, we might get a much better response if we use easy to understand. Or easy to read, depending on what we're going for. But I think in using this sort of updated model, it allows us to be more natural in the language that we'll use and get a more natural output. So we can see we've got some of these key points that we've already pulled out have actually been summarized. So it's part of the Energy and Jobs Plan. It's planning to create 10,000 jobs and 33 billion, which is all information that it's put in here, but it's actually made it much easier for us to look at. I'm going to start a new chat and we're going to do a comparison with 3.5. So let me use the exact same prompt that I've used up here. Copy that into a new chat with 3.5. Cool, did we get everything? Yes. And you see, it is going much faster. It's already finished in its first response. And maybe I'll pull this up in a new tab and do no, for readability, I'm gonna leave it in separate ones just so we can all see this nice and easily. But you can see that it's pulled out again still some of the key information. So the number of jobs, the economic activity, the green hydrogen industry is a significant element of the energy and jobs plan, and aiming to achieve net zero emissions. So we've got some of the key points. I'm going to give it the same output here, or the same follow-up, and we'll see what the end result is between the two. And you can see it's one significantly faster. So we've got 5 key points that have come out of here. So establishing clear policies, creating jobs and economic activity within the next few years. Green hydrogen industry, state government is investing in more than 50 hydrogen projects and 4.5 billion, and it'll help decarbonize heavy haulage shipping and particular industries. Great. And you can see we get much more detail using GPT-4 with just the same prompts, although it is slightly slower, particularly information about ensuring safe construction, which may be particularly pertinent depending on the type of industry that we're using. But I thought that a fascinating thing to do would be to take exactly this output here, and we're going to create a new chat, and we're going to try and get it to recreate the exact same media release. Well, not exact same, but a similar release. So I'm going to use a role assignment here, and tell ChatGPT that it is going to be, you are on the marketing and communications team at the Queensland government. That sound familiar to anyone here? We are drafting a media release with the following key points. Can you please provide a first draft? Let's see what we come up with. Take out that, and how close we can actually get to regurgitating that initial list. And you'll see it's going to also attempt, because I've told it that it's creating a media release, it's going to attempt to sort of capture some of the formatting that we might see in a typical media release as well, and use as much information as it can. I think something we're really going to struggle with is this particular stuff, so we won't be able to get, obviously, quotes from the Minister for Energy, because we haven't given it any quotes for the Minister for Energy. But it may make some up, which is why it's always important to make sure that you fact check any of this information. So set a spokesperson from the Queensland government. Let's see what we gave. And I think this is a very interesting opportunity to understand that absolutely first drafts only, because it's generating quotes from people. Though it is able to get a rough estimate and actually sort of build a media release out for you, when you're able to probably provide more contextual information than just a few bullet points, you're going to get a significantly better response here. So I'm going to call this GPT-4 media release, and we're going to do exactly the same thing with the GPT-3 release, or 3.5. And let me take the same prompt. Start. Okay, he's probably going to, oh, I didn't want it to do that yet. Let me start this one again. GPT-4 media release, sorry. We're going to take this key points. Oh, sorry, take the key points from this one. Okay. You are on the marketing app. And we'll see it's able to go much faster, but again, is generating quotes and even assigning them to people at this point. So the Minister for Energy, Renewables and Hydrogen, Honourable Mick de Brini, if I didn't absolutely butcher that pronunciation. So perfect examples of why it's very important to actually make sure that you're fact checking anything. And is Mick, yeah, Mick, it's good. So it does have some degree of updated information. But let's say this format is not particularly useful for us using GPT 3.5. So we might want to ask a follow-up. Can you please reformat that into a standard media release format? And we'll see what this is able to give us. It's really just added this down here. So I think, Mel, this sort of speaks to the questions before that you had about the difference between 3.5 and 4 and their actually ability to understand what we're asking for. For very simple prompts like these that I'm giving, GPT-4 is going to actually give you a significantly better output. And it's really important to note the different capabilities between the different tools and where they have the best places. Mel, I'm cognizant that we're sort of running close to time for questions. I know we wanted to have 5 or 10 minutes at the end, and there's a little bit of wrap up that we need to do as well. So I might pause my screen share here, run through any questions that anybody has.
Okay, well, let's great. Well, we'll get a couple of questions started. I guess the first question, we had a couple of questions come through prior to tonight's event was, as a comms and marketing professionals, what is it about this that we should be taking forward with our careers? So what is it that, should we be worried, or should we be going, actually, we should be embracing this, and how do we actually use this to go to, as we said, future-proof our careers?
Yeah, well, I think that's a fantastic question, because there is always that fear. There is that fear of technology replacing people's jobs. But as we've just seen in a little bit of live demo, and I might stop my screen share here so that I can see everyone. We've seen in a little bit of live demo that it's not necessarily taking anyone's jobs, particularly not right now. It is a tool to enable and enhance your own creativity and your own productivity, to help you sort of spend less time doing some of the stuff that might be potentially more monotonous, and enable you to do the things that you're really good at. It's going to be a massively long time before computers are able to do the sort of type of complex logical reasoning that human brains are actually able to do, and particularly without all the context that we're able to hold. So I think it's really important to understand how to use it, understand its place within your sort of tool set, but know that it is very much a way to enhance your own capabilities.
So we shouldn't be worried that we'll be replaced by chatbots anytime soon.
I wouldn't expect particularly, really high-level communications professionals to have too much to worry about with these particular tools. I think the people that really have to worry is copywriters from Fiverr at the moment, really. The ability to do multilingual translation is really powerful, but the accuracy is not there that a real human is going to have.
Okay. A question from Adele: does Google penalize ChatGPT or any AI generated content?
So that was actually a really interesting point of contention. There was a relatively recent release from Google that no, it does not. It doesn't care about how the content has been generated, but it would penalize content that doesn't, well, not necessarily penalize. It will promote content that adds value and provides unique understanding or insights. So a purely generated AI piece of information is not going to necessarily provide any new information or insights, and therefore is probably not going to rank particularly well in search algorithms. But you won't be penalized for putting out that type of content. It just won't be deemed as particularly high quality.
Okay. Another question here: does ChatGPT keep your text? So if you put text into it and summarize confidential information, is it actually in their system?
Yes. So that is sort of part of the concern that people were having with their with putting in proprietary information. So anything that I've put into here, including all of this information, sits on their servers and may be accessible by their human people, or if they were to have any data breaches, it could potentially be leaked. So don't use any proprietary information. Like I mentioned at the start, there are a couple of things here that you can do to sort of minimize that. One is jumping into the settings and going to your data controls and switching off the chat history and training. And that means that you won't keep a history, and that won't be as accessible, but it still could potentially be read by humans on the other end. It just won't be used to train their model. Mm-hmm. So if you're worried about your information getting leaked or anything like that, use this feature, but again, don't put any proprietary information.
Okay. Another question that's come through on the chat: is there a word limit that ChatGPT can effectively analyze? I read somewhere that it struggles with over 1,500 words.
Yes, a word limit is not quite. So it works on things called tokens, and a token roughly equates to, I think it's 1 or 1.3 words or something like that. It has a quote unquote memory span that I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm sorry. But if you try to have a seriously long and iterative conversation, if you're going between different topics, then it will struggle to retain information from too far back in the conversation. But if your topic is around the same sort of, or your conversation is around the same topic, what you'll actually be doing is reusing the same tokens. So you won't necessarily, it's not like a hard word limit, because if it's repeating itself or talking about a lot of the same thing, or you're having an iterative conversation, its memory is technically longer than if you're trying to have about 5 different conversations in one chat.
Okay.
But yeah, best to keep an eye on it.
Another question, just in more general about AI tools, is how they could be used to support inclusive communication practices. So you touched on it briefly earlier around neurodiversity, but also any kind of people with disability. How could these be useful?
Well, I think it's fantastic because it enables you to take your input and then output it in whatever way that you want. So if you need to make it accessible for people who have various needs, be that the particular example that comes to mind is my partner's dyslexic, and she uses it to both take contextual information from other people and give her 5 different ways to read it so that she can use what works best for her. And then also for her to put her own thoughts into there and spit out a version that's going to be really effective at conveying what the point she's trying to get across. But it is also used really heavily with things like Khan Academy to explain things at different levels of understanding on a various array of topics. So you can really use it to input or get whichever output that you need for the people that you're communicating with.
Right. Another question that had come through earlier, and this is something that actually excites me, is are there any other AI tools that you think as comms people we should be excited about? Now, I personally stumbled across one called Munch just recently, which takes your video content and breaks it up into video snippets and ready for Instagram, LinkedIn,
so
whatever.
good.
Uses AI to go, hey, like these are the words that are trending. So it pulls out those snippets from your video and breaks it up into these snippets for your social media or whatever that looks like, which honestly saves me so much bloody time.
Yeah.
But what else are you seeing that's pretty cool that we should be aware of?
Well, there's a couple of things actually, and this was something I wanted to touch on earlier that is within the GPT ecosystem. They are testing capability for GPT to query the web and get updated live information, which is going to be fantastic. Very soon, there is going to be image and video input rather than just textual. So you'll be able to upload photos and then ask it to do things based on what information that you're giving it from a photo. And there's also going to be image output using OpenAI's other tool, which is DALL-E 2, if anyone's used that. It's an image generation tool, which is quite interesting. But outside the sort of realm of OpenAI's tools, there are loads of things in development. There's AI chatbots and agents that can help you sell products from your e-commerce store. There is a whole suite of tools being developed by Microsoft, who have a very significant deal, a $10 billion investment in OpenAI, I believe, that will basically allow you to use your SharePoint, your Office, your PowerPoint, your Teams meetings with a GPT-trained chatbot to help you generate proposals based on your company data, which is going to be really fascinating when it hits live servers. They haven't given a release date. They've given teaser information about how it could be used, and it looks incredibly powerful. So lots of stuff to be excited about.
That's cool. We've got time for just one or two more questions. So Kirsten's asked, any thoughts on Copilot from Microsoft?
That's the one I was just talking about.
Okay.
Kirsten, I'm so excited about it. I want to see more than just those like 1.5 minute demo videos, to be honest. But I think when that actually is rolled out for sort of public access, it may really enable you to pull data from so many different places within your sort of Microsoft ecosystem and potentially allow a little bit more flexibility. If you're wanting to do that type of stuff at the moment, everything needs to live in like a CRM, a really rigid database, but this allows you to extract information from like a Word document or like a Microsoft Teams meeting minute notes, or just some notes you've taken on your SharePoint or your whatever note-taking device. So I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm excited about that, and I hope it is as effective as they have sort of teased in their promotional videos so far.
That's great. Right. So look, we're right on 7 o'clock. So if you have any more questions, please pop them in the chat and I will share them with Tom afterwards. And we will be sending around an email tomorrow with the recording link from tonight as well. So if we've got any more questions or links, we can pop into that as well. Just want to bring you up to speed. If you really liked tonight's topic and you want to learn more about AI, we do have one coming up in August, which is a breakfast event. Bosco, one of our board members, is the keynote for this, and he showed us a demo of some of the stuff he's been working on a couple of months ago in a board meeting, and it is scary. Well, not scary, it's fascinating. So essentially what this this AI that what they're working on does is kind of go, okay, I can tell you exactly what colors, what fonts, what pictures to use for an advertisement in this country that will get the most bang for your buck on Facebook. So it just trawls data from across the world and goes, here, pull these things together, and that advertisement will work. And he showed us some of this during that session, and it was incredible. And certainly there, from a comms and marketing perspective, you look at this stuff and go, well, you know, this is the future and it's coming. So save the date for that one. We'll have more information on that soon. But also coming up, we've got a session at lunchtime on the 22nd of June with Erica Brush from UNU Recruitment. She's going to be talking to us about industry trends and also some communication tips for that next job that you might want to go for. And we also have a session on understanding and communicating psychological safety coming up in July with Kylie Leota. So she is going to be talking to us through about, well, what psychological safety is and what it isn't. And very cognizant of the fact that, yes, we're in comms, but it's not all junkets and press conferences, right? We work in some pretty high pressure environments. Sometimes we deal with subject matter that isn't very pleasant. So how do we look after ourselves, but how do we use our comms talents as well to help foster psychologically safe environments as well? And a bunch of other events coming up as well very soon. And as always, if you are an IABC member, you get a lot of these events for free or heavily discounted, plus access to a whole world online of information and connections across the world. So I would love to get your feedback on tonight's event. So please take a couple of minutes to share your feedback. And a couple of other things I just should mention, the IABC APAC region conference is coming up in September. And if you are looking for a tax-deductible reason to go to Bali, this is it. 4th and 5th of September in Bali, Indonesia, is the APAC regional conference for IABC. So save the date for that one. Calls for speakers are now open as well. So if you think you might have something you could share with that audience of comms people from all over Asia Pacific, absolutely throw your hat in the ring. And the World Conference is in Toronto in 4 weeks. So we'll be sharing some key takeaways from that when we get back as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming along tonight. I hope you enjoyed Tom's insights. He certainly had a lot to share. And as I said, tomorrow, we will absolutely get that recording out to you ASAP. And in the meantime, please, everybody, have a safe and wonderful evening. And we will talk to you all again very soon. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Have a great night.